Hey everyone, I'm Chad.
I'm Dakota.
Welcome to Back Road Resurrection, where everything car related and old school cars is where you're going to find it here. So welcome, and let's jump into this.
On this episode here, we're going to go into in-depth from old school to new school carburetors. We're going to talk about the fuel, the caustics of the new fuel, and we're going to go into depth. We're actually going to show you on this Brawler 750, which is the one that everybody loves and everyone talks about. We're going to show you what that modern fuel did to that brand new anodized coating for these newer carburetors.
And that carburetor is not that old.
That carburetor is exactly 7 years old to this day. So stay tuned.
First, I want to thank you for taking the initiative to learn about carburetors. Carburetors is a very good tool for motors. They've been around since the beginning of automotives and beginning of equipment. You have to have a way to meter the fuel going into your motor and control richness. And that's the main job of the carburetor. It's basically a Venturi. You can do different searches and stuff on Venturis to understand how it works. Basically, you're dealing with a high pressure, low pressure situation, and low pressure pulls fuel into the engine and makes your engine run. Now, the nuances on how to tune them, we'll get into that as well, but that's probably for different videos. So let's jump into it. This is we're Back Roads Revival. My name is Chad. This is my son, Dakota. He's been helping me build cars ever since he was a little boy. I used to race UMP modifieds and been a part of drag racing since I was a little boy with my dad and all his friends. And so there's a lot of knowledge that us older guys have that, you know, it's good for us to pass that along. And I'm hoping this is what we're doing here. I'm teaching him how to do some of this stuff. And he's learning a lot. He knows quite a bit for a young man, 25 years old. But the old ways and different ways of doing stuff is kind of what we're going to get into in this whole video series. So let's jump into this. What do you want to mainly cover today? The over the years?
Yeah, so today we're going to be covering just kind of like how carburetors have changed over the years. Here we got on the bench here, we've got models from the 60s, 70s, 90s, to even the modern era of something as new as a 2026 model carburetor and even a 2020 model carburetor. So we're going to cover into the kind of the years, the differences, and then, you know, what they did and how they did it. So starting here, we got from 60s all the way through early 70s, a vacuum secondary carburetor. In this carburetor, if you notice, it's not your traditional one. You call Holly and you go ask them about that, or you call Jigs or Summit, and you're going to find one of the old school builders who's going to tell you about this guy.
They might not know what you're talking about.
So this is a vacuum choke. So what this did was actually really cool technology. It's super innovative in its time. It used vacuum on the motor on top of your initial cast iron manifold blocks, and it pulled vacuum
intake
pulled vacuum on your intake to determine whether or not that choke, which has been removed on this carburetor, someone had hopped it up later in life, and it would actually control your choke valve that you see on a lot of your newer ones that is now controlled by a little electronic solenoid. This is the predecessor to the electronic solenoid, and it gave people an option, a dummy-proof option, to go away from the manual chokes.
Yeah, this was more of an OEM setup. This would have come from like your Chrysler, your Pontiacs, your Ford, and so on. There was a vacuum gauge or a vacuum sensor that would screw into your intake, and once the engine temperature got above a certain temperature, it would close, stop the vacuum coming from your manifold to this, and would disengage the choke that way. This was a lot easier than the old manual chokes that was on a cable driven. That's what some of your earliest choke setups for these carburetors, but we're starting to go down a little bit. I think we're too much details for this type of video. But we want to kind of go over the nuances, because this is a 650. This is a 650. And this is a 750. So these are just Hollies. You had Carter AFB, you had Elderbrock, which is what the Elderbrock is based off of, is the old Carter AFBs. You got Quadrajets, so you got a lot of different color carburetors here and a lot of different configurations. They all work very similar. It's just how they achieve that goal is by different metering rods, different spring rates, and, you know, how do you control the fuel. So, but this is kind of just going over, you know, the differences between them, because if you go buy a used carburetor, or if you actually go to like Jigs or Summit and you start speccing out a carburetor, okay, well, the big thing is, one, how big a carburetor do I need? And everybody wants to oversize these things. And they watch Hot Rod magazine, and they watch engine builders. They watch, Steve Morris and all these different engine builders. And most of them will say use 750, 850, 950, 1050 on these motors. Okay, that's great. You can make the 750, 850 work, but if you're mainly driving this stuff on the street, is where the ideology and the opinions change. As far as a street-driven motor, okay, you can run either a vacuum secondary, which is what this carburetor here is. That's what this unit here is. This is a vacuum secondary. And this is something that apparently a lot of people don't know much about. And honestly, it's one of the better setups for a driver car, a cruiser. If you're going to be running bracket racing and you're going to be drag racing the car primarily, that's a completely different conversation, and it's a different tool for that application. But as far as the street car cruisers, vacuum secondaries are a great carburetor because it's only going to allow as much fuel as that motor needs. Not as much as you think it needs or someone tells you it needs. That motor is going to tell you what it wants, what it needs, and it's only going to pull as much as it needs. Now, you can tune them with a vacuum secondaries.
And we're going to go into tuning on a vacuum secondary carburetor for a street application on a 383 stroker, pushing about 500 horsepower. We will go into that on this Holly Demon and show you how to actually make it run right and run really good on a 1981 Pontiac Trans Am in a later video. But for now, we're just going to cover history between mechanical secondaries and how the technology has changed over the years.
Yep. And we'll also go into pump cams on what to use, how to use it, and what the difference between them are. We're also going to get into, for the vacuum secondaries, because you only have to worry about the springs on the vacuum secondaries. So they make a kit that has a lot of different springs on them like this, and all these springs are at different rates. So this is what allows the 4-barrel to open and come in at different RPMs, at different workloads, and different engine builds. So they also give you charts, which we'll get into, and it shows you about what RPM it comes in at, what RPM it maxes at, so where that 4-barrel opens up and where it's fully maxed open. Holly and these companies give you a chart that tells you all that. So in that part, it's easy. It takes a lot of hands-on manipulating and just figuring out what your motor wants and needs, because as you build your motor, and as you change things, the fuel demands are going to change. The easiest way to do that and control that and to be able to see that in live feed is an AFR gauge. With AFR gauge, it's air fuel mixture gauge. And it's definitely worth spending $100 and get one. Have the bung welded in your header, manifold, whatever you've got. You just got to make sure it's airtight and no pinholes so you can get an accurate reading. And that is for a younger guy that don't know how to read plugs and go into that kind of details, and to be able to tune the old ways. The AFR gauge is a real easy way to do it, and it's actually probably more accurate than it ever has. Just keep in mind that you'll have 3 gauges. 3 gauges will read differently. You're going to get different readings off the gauges because of the difference in sensors. Wire sizes, I'm not going to get into the rabbit hole on that, but it's close. So staunch is basically 13.6 to 14, and that 13.6, 14 is going to vary. Some motors may want a 14. Some motors may want a 13, 13.2, 13.6. So again, how that motor is running, idling, how smooth it is, how clean it is, it's going to tell you what it wants. And that's the big thing about carburetors that a lot of people, I guess, they're having a hard time wrapping their head around. It's a vacuum Venturi. And the motor is going to tell you what it needs. I sound like a broken record when it comes to that, but it's true. You can put this 750 here on a small block Chevy. It will run fairly good. You'll have to change jets on it. You'll have to change power valves on it, which we'll get into in another video on how to go through and to be able to tune these properly. Because basically, well, I think we're getting on a rabbit hole here. They're going down a different path. But the big thing is with the carburetors is specing one for what you need. The 350 Chevy, 351 modified, 360 Dodge, most of your LSs, your 5.3s, your 5.7, even up to the 6.0s. You know, typically for a street application, a 750 is going to be on the large side, because you start getting into drivability issues typically when you start getting into the bigger carburetors. You know, on the dyno, wide open throttle, it don't care. It's just looking for fuel and air, and to be able to control that, to be able to produce as much horsepower as you can eke out of a motor. Now, as far as drivability, okay, well now if it's a manual, you're going to have different workloads and different fuel inputs or signals than you are with an automatic. Are you running a big cam? Do you not have much vacuum? Are you running a stock motor that's pulling 19, 20 inches of vacuum? Though all those different elements are going to change how you tune a carburetor and what carburetor you need. Because for some applications, a 2-barrel is all you need. For other applications, a 600 or a 650 will be perfect for what you need as far as drivability. Other cases, if you're going to be running top fuel and you're going to be bracket racing, you're going to want a 950, 1050 or bigger on that motor, just so it can get as much air and fuel into it as possible.
But ultimately, so when this comes down to is it comes down to your driving vehicles. Everyone's going to tell you, oh, motor size and cubic inch, you need X, Y, and Z. We're here to tell you that's not always the case. Nope. Get out there, talk to your grandfather, talk to your dad, or whoever it is, and maybe they've got an old Oldsmobile in the backyard that maybe they want to sell to you dirt cheap. Maybe they got an old square body Chevy or an old Ford or whatever it is, and maybe it's got a vacuum secondary on it. Maybe he did some work to it and has got some mechanical secondary on it and everything else. But there's also some hot rodder tricks that we can show you on later on in another video on the vacuum secondaries, where you can actually make a vacuum secondary, a mechanical secondary too, if you broke it on a budget. So we can get into all that later on in a later video. But as far as this one, now we're going to go and we'll talk about air bleeds on modern to older. So on the older ones, a lot of them, they still have the same air bleeds. So as you see, 700, 750, 750. So
no, it's 600.
You got press-in air bleeds. So you still can change them, you still can modify them. It's just a little more work, and a little more, don't go too advanced on them. These are 10 times easier to change. Your air blades are all screw in. That's one beautiful thing about modern evolution with this stuff. The older ones though, if you make a mistake, you go too big, you gotta basically run a screw into them, slide hammer them out, put a new set in, press them back in, and try it again.
It's a major deal to change them out.
So yeah, like I said, it's cool to see where those technologies come. But yeah, I think that'll wrap it up for this video for now, talking about the history and everything else. We look forward to seeing you in the next video, where we go into more depth on vacuums, more in depth on mechanical, and everything else. So
one thing I would like to add before we get out of this video is here to a quick way to tell the difference between a mechanical and a vacuum secondary. Is this little unit right here. This is your vacuum secondary. This is actually what makes your 4-barrel open. On a mechanical secondary, it's going to look like this. There's not all that vacuum is not going to be there. So your linkage actually opens up the 4-barrel. So that's a quick, easy way to tell the difference between a mechanical secondary and a vacuum secondary. So with that, let's wrap it up, and let's subscribe and like if you like this video, and check out some of our other stuff we're coming up with. This is a new channel. We're just getting going. So hopefully we can help you out. If you got any questions, let us know.